Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group, where I am interviewing thought leaders, tech leaders, entrepreneurs within the technical space, predominantly across the UK and the Netherlands, asking them a bit about their story, what's exciting them and market conditions around technology, and those all-important career advice for many of our listeners who are looking to enter into their first or second jobs. So really pleased to have Martin Samsa with me today. Martin is the CTO and founder of Conway & Co. Conway is it's an up-and-coming boutique advisory firm that works with a number of clients around their digital commerce strategy. And what you'll hear from Martin is quite an interesting story of where he's an entrepreneur today, but how he got there through the past businesses he's worked in. And speaking to him myself prior to this podcast, you can really see how someone's progressed in their career. So really excited to hear about that. So without further ado, welcome to Martin.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Hello to everyone. Thank you for having me as well. Hopefully it will be an exciting journey. We'll see. But just to share a little bit about myself, and as you already mentioned, I'm the founder and CTO of Conway, which is a small boutique agency. We work primarily with founders of startups, executives in large companies and investors, and we help them with digital commerce. So what that means is digital commerce for us is everything, it's something we call digital backbone. And that digital backbone for us involves everything from technology, people and team organization, customer journeys, so kind of the whole package to help companies create really world-class digital experiences. So we are relatively young. We started only, I think, a few months ago. So we are growing quite quickly. It's very fun to work with different kind of organizations, especially now with Corona and all the challenges they're facing. Before that, I was in various technology leadership roles for some really interesting companies because they all kind of share the same characteristics. It wasn't by design, it was kind of by accident, but it was a lot of fun. So they were all global companies which grew really rapidly. So they were all companies which were between 100 to 400 million in revenue. They were all global and they all had a double-digit growth, either in revenue or in people, but mostly in both. So I was fulfilling the CTO role with responsibility for technology and partly also for product. And that was something which is, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, growing at that rapid pace and that much change and that much, it's not for everyone, but it's amazing learning experience. It's amazing growth experience. So it's fantastic, especially if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, because you're in a large company that is doing amazing things. Yet at the same time, you have that freedom and flexibility to really achieve things and make an impact. And before that, I did the typical software developer, software engineer, however you want to call it, path. I started as a junior, grow into senior, architect, principal, did a variety of things, everything from web applications to large distributed microservice systems and all that good fun. So it has been a very, so my journey wasn't really linear. It was kind of like, so part of it was linear and then you had these massive spikes of going up and then kind of flattening out and then massive spike going. So I was very lucky to be able to join these kind of organizations.
Fantastic.
So that's just the background.
Yeah, and then what really interests me about that, and as I mentioned in the introduction, is when you've been involved with companies going through such rapid growth. I can imagine the technology advancements or what you've seen from when you start the tech strategy to where you probably end up could be so different. I mean, when we think about technology with companies that are going through such growth, what was part of that journey like?
Yeah, so the interesting part about this is that the technology was obviously part of the challenge, but it was only part of the challenge. When you're growing and changing so rapidly, it's also a lot about the culture that you're building within the engineering teams, the mindset, the prioritization. Like, so what do we? Because you have to keep growing at that rapid pace, but at the same time you have to set up the basics. You have to organize yourself. You have to think about tech infrastructure and which technology you're going to choose and when do you scale. But at the same time, how do we organize ourselves as a team, who has which responsibility, who do we need to hire, what is the key focus area for us, because at that time kind of everything is the focus. And you have parts of the technology which are held by duct tape, because they kind of, that's kind of how they organically grew, and that's normal, that's okay. And then you have other pieces which are new and shiny. So how does this all kind of come together, interact? I think that was the biggest challenge, because usually if people tend to focus on one aspect of it, it's like technology or the people or everything else, but it always leaves you hanging, and there's always something missing. You have to kind of get everything together. And actually, to be honest, critical part was also who do you hire as well. People who are willing to take on that challenge, who are willing to have things which are not exactly perfect, people who are willing to have things which are a little bit out there, people who are creative in their thinking, like thinking about outside the box, which might be, okay, we can't solve this technically, but it's a great thing for the business. So how do we kind of hack it in or make it manual, fake it till you make it, and then go back to it and make it technically proper? Those are all aspects of it.
Yeah, and again, thinking about a lot of our listeners who are entering the job market, and what was interesting with that is, you're right, there's legacy technology that has been around for a long time, which companies have been built on, versus the new and latest and most advanced, and even people entering probably have to have the mindset to be able to look at both, isn't it? You can't just be a single-minded person when entering a fast-growing business, I guess.
No, absolutely. I mean, any business, especially fast-growing business, but any business, software, like digital, like any other job, there's always things that you're not going to like and that you're not going to be excited about. There's always part of it. But being able to take those in stride and being able to recognize where the business value is, I think, is the most critical aspect. Often, so engineers by default, we're a very excitable bunch, building cool technology and pushing the envelope and building something amazing. We're also very creative. That's just in us. So striking that balance, okay, cool, this might not be pretty right now, but it's critical for the business and the customer. And we versus, okay, let's rewrite this and let's do something new. I think that is actually the most important aspect. And the most talented engineers that I ever worked with were people who can tell exactly what to focus on and what to improve versus what to leave for later.
Yeah. And a lot of the conversations I've been having recently on a lot of the past podcasts, there seems to be this debate around polyglot engineering. So a lot of our graduates nowadays are, when I was starting the business 15 years ago, it was the client demands were, I want a .NET out and out specialist or a Java J2E, and it's got to be very specialist. And nowadays, polyglot engineering, full stack development, people are looking for generalists. Where do you sit when you think about, advice to a graduate and the type of teams you're trying to build? Polyglot or specialist?
So I'm a big believer in something called T-shaped engineers. So that means that these are people who have one in-depth expertise, but have various pieces of knowledge about other things. So my advice would be, don't try to take everything on board and don't try to learn everything, because things change at such a rapid pace. Like, for example, on front end, I think by the time we finish this conversation, there will be 6 new JavaScript frameworks, and in 2 years, 3 of those will be popular. And then 6 months after that, none of them will be popular. Not as much on backend and on infrastructure, but things are rapidly changing and evolving. Just if you look at the cloud, AWS has hundreds of services. Same thing for Azure. Nobody can be expert in all of this. What is important is to be able to understand the critical basics and aspects of how everything comes together, and then be an expert in one thing in particular. So just to give you a practical example, when I talk to, when I'm looking for a DevOps, for example, yes, they need to be an expert on infrastructure, on deployment, on automation, on all these things. But what I'm looking for is, do you have at least cursory understanding of, for example, how front end works, how backend microservices work, because it helps them immensely with their day-to-day job, because it gives them context. It gives them context with what are engineers that you're working with struggling with. It gives you context on where you can, for example, improve things which might not be obvious if you didn't know about it. So my recommendation is, start broad, and then at some point find what you're really passionate about, find really one strong thing, and then drill down on it. And it can be a language, it can be a framework, it can be just a specific type of job like backend versus DevOps or full stack. But don't try to be great at everything, and don't be good at only one thing, because you will miss critical context for the rest of the things. And this is especially true in large applications and large systems, because it's near impossible to know even the whole system. But if you know how it all comes together, if you have that understanding, you can make a lot of improvements by pressuring on the key constraints, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and thank you for that, because that's the first, T-shape engineering is a new one to me, but it makes so much logical sense. That's
Yeah, so it's definitely not something I came up with. T-shaped people is it's a very popular thing in Agile.
yeah,
So not Scrum, but just Agile in general, Agile methodology, Agile way of thinking. And it also helps, especially when you have cross-functional teams, because then everybody kind of understands each other and where the pains are and what you're trying to achieve.
yeah, yeah. Great. And so thinking, we've already given a really good piece of advice there, and I totally support that with our listeners, thinking about, don't become a pure expert in one, but make sure you have a core skill, and then you've got the breadth of skills. What other one or two bits of advice would you give if you were looking, for our grads who are going into the job market?
Yeah. So actually, what I primarily focus on when I'm hiring somebody and when I'm doing interviewing and everything else is two things which have nothing to do with technology. And they are actually communication and willingness to learn. So what I mean by willingness to learn, I don't mean in the technology part, because developers are always tinkering. We're always finding new things to learn. And that's something which is kind of just ingrained in a lot of people. And even if it isn't, that's fine. You absorb new things through work. Mostly about things which are not related to your actual job. So, for example, if you're joining an e-commerce company, do you care about the product, or do you care about the tech stack? If you're, I'm not even talking about do you care about e-commerce, but do you take care about a specific product that you're selling? So, for example, I was chief of engineering at Suit Supply. If you don't care about the suits and the clothing and everything that we're doing and the apparel that we're selling, the impact that you're going to have is going to be minimal, because you're only going to be thinking about the technical aspect of things. You're going to be thinking only about, there's not going to be a lot of passion in there. It's going to be a job for you, but there's not going to be a passion. And I believe that for people who are just starting, finding those early companies that you can be passionate about, that you can immerse yourself about, that you can really find something that excites you about, is the best way to learn, is the best way to grow, because then you're going to absorb knowledge and experience like crazy.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Like care about what the company is doing, care about who they are, care about their product. That is the most important thing, especially when you're just starting. When it comes to willingness to learn, it's also about communication. So just to be perfectly blunt, developers don't always have the best communication, and they always don't have always the best clarity and everything else. And I think that's a really, let's say, a missed opportunity, because all of these people are extremely smart. They're extremely capable. They have very good ideas, but communication is hard. It's hard for everyone. We need to understand each other. We need to find a way to kind of unlock that special way of communicating what we're thinking, what we're trying to convey. Investing time in communication is by far the most important thing you can do. Learning that either through just reading books, or absorbing, or observing, or talking to somebody who is an expert on that, you're going to go far in your career. You're going to learn so much. You're going to have a lot more fun, and you're going to have a lot less frustration. Because this is also what I've seen in developers who want to communicate an idea, which is a great idea, but they don't know, for example, how to communicate to a marketeer, or to an executive, or to somebody who doesn't have their knowledge in their background.
Yeah. Yeah.
Communication and care about the product. Those are the two most important things.
And I couldn't agree with you more. From our side of the table, obviously, when we're working for clients and trying to find the right talent, I couldn't agree with you more. Communication, willingness to learn, and what really inspires me is when I look at the future of technologists and engineering, what people are studying at university. it starts there really, doesn't it? I've always advised to graduates to get used to being able to do public speaking, for example. Try push yourself out there as early in your career as you can, so you don't get pigeonholed, or you don't get used to an environment where you can't speak about your ideas. And it really does ring a bell to me, because a big challenge I see in the later stages of people's careers is there's a lack of diversity, or there's a lack of breadth of skills, because it hasn't been people haven't been given the opportunity to talk, to communicate, to learn. So if anything, now, whilst we're improving that funnel of talent coming in, we've got to embrace it, don't we? And we've got to support it.
Absolutely. And even, for example, some people struggle with anxiety. So public speaking and these kind of things, they're really hard and they're really difficult. But you don't even have to go to that extreme. Just like, for example, if you just talk to an other engineer in your team, or talk to your manager, or find somebody where you can just kind of practice expressing these things, or just practice giving feedback, these kind of things, just to get you more comfortable with expressing yourself in such a way that everyone else can adopt what you're saying and what you're thinking. It can be very small as well, but it is a critical skill. Otherwise, I think it leads to a lot of frustration and a lot of missed opportunities for everyone.
Yeah. No, again, thank you, Martin. That is such good advice. And you're right. You don't need to go to the extremes of public speaking, but caring and building those relationships, and creating environments where you can openly communicate. And so, well, I think that's that's what a brilliant way of rounding that up. And from the notes I've taken from this, we pass on to our listeners, thinking about communication, thinking about willingness to learn, and thinking about the T-shape engineering, that breadth of experience whilst having that core subject. There are three really, really good takeaways. And for all of our listeners, taking those on board will set you in a really, really good stead. So that's another podcast. Martin, thank you for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was brilliant.
Great. And for everyone listening, that's another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. The podcast is on our landing page, arrowspodcasts.com. It's also on the career pages of our 16 partner universities, soon to be 18, in fact, by the end of the month, and on Spotify and Apple and Google Play. So for everyone listening, thank you one more time. Thank you, Martin. And here's another episode.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.